My name is Vivi from Singapore Cybersecurity Consortium. A very good welcome to our 10th technology talk and the second one that we hold online. This time we are very happy to collaborate with the IEEE Computer Chapter to bring you more of the technology talks in the area of cybersecurity. So first we will start with a few housekeeping announcements just to familiarize you with the system that we are using for this online talk. And then as you can see, there'll be 3 talks after the opening remarks from our principal investigator. So without further ado, this event, we are recording it. So the recording later on, after we obtain the permission from the speakers, we may publish in whole or in part on the channels that we have, which is our website and social media. So we seek your cooperation to keep the mics muted except for the speakers during their presentation so that we don't get much background noise. So at the end of each presentation, we will have the Q&A for the particular speaker. We have the meeting chat window, if you can see the icon there. You can type your questions during the talk itself and also during the Q&A session, and then the speaker and I will be helping the speaker to pick out the questions, and then the speaker will address them. Yeah, so I think so far so good. So now we will proceed with the opening remarks. May I invite Professor Abhik Roy Chaudhary to give the opening remarks.
Thanks, Vivi. Okay, so I'll get started. Maybe people are still coming in, but probably I'll get started. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this technology talk. This is something that we hold quarterly at the Singapore Cybersecurity Consortium. In this very brief opening remarks, I'll describe a little bit about the consortium and what we do, so that people who are in for the first time can probably also know about it and probably share it with their friends and network. So the Singapore Cybersecurity Consortium is established in 2016, about 4 years ago, and it's really a nationwide platform for engagement between industry, academia, and government, with the goal of greater awareness, adoption, and translation of cybersecurity technologies. Okay, so I'll explain very briefly what that means. Because of course awareness, adoption, and translation for this purpose, different mechanisms or vehicles need to be adopted. So the members are really the public agencies, the academia, and the industry members. Okay, so it's really very external focused effort. So very focused on the industry, and any Singapore registered company with interest or expertise in cybersecurity is eligible to apply for the membership. So it's really open to all, and they can apply for the membership depending on the tier they're interested in. The IHLs as well as the public agencies are also members of the consortium, so that we can have this three-way engagement. As of now, there are 35 industry members, with Mitsubishi and Standard Chartered in platinum, Custodio, Olam, and Vidyatek in gold, and the rest of them are companies are silver members. So we would also give a shout out and a warm welcome to our newest members, Silvaco and Silence Laboratories. Usually at this point of time, we have a small round of applause, but of course we are meeting online. So I guess we will kind of give the applause, but it will not be heard loudly. So in terms of the public agencies and the academia, all of the academic institutions like NUS, NTUS, MUS, UTD, SIT, SUSS, they are included. Temasek Polytechnic, Singapore Polytechnic, SP, all of these are included, STAR as well, along with ADSC. And in terms of public agencies, these are some of the public agencies which are included. So this is actually part of the Singapore Cybersecurity Consortium is actually only a component of the National Cybersecurity R&D program, and which includes several vehicles. This is only one of the vehicles, like the National Satellites of Excellence, various research grants, the NCL and iTrust labs, and also the postgraduate scholarship. So this is only one vehicle in the multifaceted national NCR program. This is the steering committee. I'll probably not need to read out all the names. And this is the management committee with representatives from the various universities. So now maybe I can discuss a little bit very briefly about what do we mean by awareness, adoption, and translation. So essentially, we would proceed to engage with the members in 3 dimensions. One is the training and technology update. One is the discussions to alleviate the pain points. And then is the dreaming up of new projects. So it really goes from training all the way into translation. And of course, the same company could engage along all the 3 dimensions, maybe in different topics. That's quite possible. So under the training, we have these vehicles, the annual cybersecurity camp or a workshop, and the quarterly technology talks. So we are in one of them right now. And under the discussions, we have, of course, the special interest groups and the Wild and Crazy Ideas Day. And under the translation, there are 2 vehicles. There's a seed grant, and we have enthusiastic participation from the various companies in that, as well as there's this Lean Launchpad, where also we see quite a bit of participation. Lean Launchpad cybersecurity track, which kind of provides some mentorship to have greater entrepreneurship. So this is the structure of some of the annual cybersecurity camps that we have done. They were on different topics: deep learning and cybersecurity, blockchain and cybersecurity, secure critical infrastructure, and so on. We are planning to have one this year as well, but the details will be disclosed at a later point of time once they are approved and available. In terms of the quarterly technology talks, so we are in one of them right now. In fact, in this online format, we have to do it a little bit shorter maybe. In the offline format, we used to have it in a somewhat bigger way with a bigger participation. So as we get more comfortable presenting online, we can probably also morph these technology talks a little bit. The special interest groups, we have the various component members, in particular the university members leading one special interest group. So like NUS is leading this one, the threat intelligence, and then the NTU is leading the system and software security, and so on. These are really small group discussions so that people are really comfortable to discuss what they want to discuss with their colleagues. And this is also to discuss some of the pain points, to really have informal discussions on some of the pain points that people are facing in practice and not only in theory. We have this Wild and Crazy Ideas Day also as part of the discussion, and this is sort of how the discussion leads into the translation. So the Wild and Crazy Ideas Day is really a format to allow people to pitch their ideas, like the industry can pitch their ideas, what they want the academia to solve, and similarly the academia, an academic who is very passionate of getting a problem solved, in collaboration with the industry, can come and pitch it. So we have had several of such pitchings in the past. And this Wild and Crazy Ideas Day really leads into the grant calls. So this is how the discussion moves into the translation. This leads into the grant call because it also gives various problem statements for us to look into. And it leads into this annual seed grant call, which is not given to a single company or a single university, but really to a university company pair or a university public agency pair. And typically we are focusing on projects which are slightly high TRL, like TRL maybe 4 to 8, and typically things which are more focused on the state of the practice rather than only the state of the art. The Lean Launchpad Cybersecurity Track, this is something, in fact, we launched after the consortium was launched. So this is something which came in the second phase of the consortium. It was not there in the first phase. And this is something really we are very enthused and very proud about. It's a 10-week experiential learning program that we hold jointly with the Lean Launchpad Singapore, LLP Singapore, which involves a whole lot of host of things, including market validation, industry membership, technical expert sharing, as well as business coaching. So we have the business coaching, and also we will have the professors, the technical professors, come in and share their expertise, particularly the professors who are more entrepreneurial minded. Okay, so we will typically invite them to share their expertise. So the next Lean Launchpad, here is a shout out, and this is the QR code. So this is from 21st August, so coming up pretty fast. So these are not held like every day. So within this 10-week period, it will be held at specific clusters of days. And the closing date for applying is coming up soon. This is on 9th of August. So I'll probably hover in this slide a little bit longer for people to take in the information. Let me just pause for a few seconds. The website is here and the contact is here. And you can also contact us. I will share our email shortly. You can also contact us, but let me just pause for a few seconds. Okay, so hopefully everybody got the information. Okay, so this is in partnership with CSA, and also there are the central node, which is the NUS Enterprise, and also various satellite nodes. Okay, and in terms, these are some of the completed seed grant projects. The details of them are available in our website, so I will not dwell on them because there are several talks, exciting talks today, so I will not dwell on them. This is one university and one company, as I mentioned. And there are several ongoing seed grant projects as well. In particular, say, for example, this one, which is really on a smart grid honeypot. There are some on AI system security for AI, so NTU, ADSC, and iSprint. And there's one on application security and one on the secure collaborative analysis on sensitive data. So you can see various universities are involved and also various companies are involved. So just moving on, so we have participated in also various other events, which is with the goal of tech adoption drives. In particular, this Cybersecurity Innovation Day, which is organized from CSA, which, as we know, is a very successful event, and we are very proud to have participated in that. And several other events as well, like this Industry Day, also as part of SICW. This is also something where we are very proud of the participation. This is the Singapore International Cyber Week. So if you are new to the cybersecurity arena in Singapore, this is certainly one event to watch out for, the SICW, which is held every year. Okay, there are also broader community connections, as you might imagine, a lot of event partnerships, regional connections, global conversations, which we are always part of, including the Singapore FinTech Festival, for example, and several other events like the Interpol World. So we are always part of this. And of course, the major event for us is always the SICW, the Singapore International Cyber Week. And so I would, at this point of time, I would like to conclude and invite you to join our corporate membership. So these are all the benefits that you will get. You will get a very close relationship with the research community, access to the researchers, and they will come and pitch their ideas. You will also have access to talent at the universities for internship and training. So that is always a good thing. Eligibility to apply for the seed grant. This is only open to the members. Also exposure opportunities to, for example, speaking opportunities here, say in these tech talks, for example, or also by request introduction and other things. So I guess I don't need to read out all of these things. And individuals from Singapore IHL RIs as well as non-member organizations, they can also join our mailing list. As I said, the IHL RIs are already included by default. Okay, so this is the information that I will end with. This is our website and our email address. So please email for any queries. Please email us at cyber. It's quite easy to remember. cyber@comp.nus.edu.sg. So with that, I thank you all for kindly taking time to attend this online meeting. And it's good that we are gradually in the online meeting. We are starting to reach the participation in the offline meetings, but not there yet. And we will continue to endeavor despite all the social distancing and also various regulations, etc. We will continue to endeavor to reach out to the community and grow the community through this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Abik. So now we will move on to the second speaker. Sorry, let me bring back the... Okay, so for our first speaker, very happy to introduce Assistant Professor Jun Han from School of Computing, National University of Singapore. So you can read the full bio here and also on the event webpage, but I would just like to highlight that his research interest is at the intersection of sensing systems and security, which includes Internet of Things, cyber physical systems, and mobile computing. So if you are also working on this in this area, then we very much welcome you to look up Prof. Jun Han's works, and if you have anything in common topics with him, then please do reach out. You can do that through to him directly, also through us. So Jun Han, we welcome you to start the talk.
Sure. Thank you so much for your introduction. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Can you all see my slides? Okay. All right. So I'm very happy to present my work here at Singapore Cybersecurity Consortium. My talk is titled Advantages and Risks of Sensing for Cyber Physical Security. My name is Jun Han, and I am an assistant professor at School of Computing, Department of Computer Science at the National University of Singapore. Before my talk, let me just provide a very quick introduction about myself as well as my research group titled Sensing. So my research area, as I was just introduced, is in the intersection of sensing systems and security in the domain of IoT and CPS. And if you're interested, please do not hesitate to contact me as I'm very open for collaborations. My research group is, the name of it is Sensing, pronounced Sensing. It's Sensing Embedded and Network Security Group here at NUS. And we study, the topics that have been just introduced. And my current group includes about 3 PhD students and 1 postdoc, as well as a few MS and undergrad RAs. And here's a rather outdated, but picture of our group and my students. And a lot of the work that I will be presenting today have been done by these folks. So now moving on to today's talk. So traditionally, computing has been dominant in the cyber world. Online banking, Facebook and Gmail are good examples of applications in cyber domain that we enjoy every day. However, modern computing is now transforming into cyber physical domain. This is fortified with the advent of IoT, which are network devices with sensors and actuators in various scenarios such as smart home and offices, factories and vehicles. The overwhelming number of sensors, along with artificial intelligence helps devices to make autonomous decisions, which more and more resemble human beings, us, and how we sense and interact or perceive the physical world. But given this trend of transformation, I'd like to pause for a minute and pose a question about security. Is the security we have sufficient and adequate enough to cope with this transformation? Well, you might think that traditional security approaches are really great, and like for example, online banking here. I have Bank of America, but here in Singapore we enjoy like DBS, right? And we all know that things work relatively well. I mean, we log on to Bank of America, and of course there is TLS and SSL behind the scenes, which really does server authentication, and also the servers also authenticate the clients using password and ID and password. And of course, PKI is behind the scenes, public key infrastructure. But then the thing is, traditional security has been great at protecting data in regard to identities or similar static attributes. And I just mentioned an example of authentication, which is merely a verification of identity. But the question today that I want to pose to you is, but what about in the physical world? So it turns out that the data rely much more on physical relationships among parties than their identities alone. So let me give you a quick example of what I mean. So, let's look at in the world of very near future where vehicles will be communicating with each other using wireless communication. And here, let's suppose that car M and car A are cruising down a highway, okay? And it turns out that car M here is malicious. So car M, for whatever reasons, would like to fool car A into believing that car M is actually behind car A. So car M actually sends a message saying, hey, car A, I'm actually behind you. And our little poor car A here has no choice but to accept and believe that fact, because there's no way to verify this this information. But hold on a minute. You might think that, hey, why not use digital signatures, for example, to sign with car M, signed by car M, saying that I'm actually in front or behind you, right? And you could say that you can actually add GPS information in there. But it turns out that this is actually not sufficient enough, because first of all, digital signatures alone merely provides verification of identity. It doesn't provide any information about locality. And GPS information, while it might seemingly sound good, is at best a low in accuracy, but it can oftentimes be spoofed. So we now have, as I mentioned, like there are these new problems that arise due to these things. And the challenge is that we need to verify the identity and physical relationships together. And the way to do this is really asking the question, how can we teach IoT devices to reason and learn about their physical relationships and context? And from a lot of my work, my recent work, we've been trying to use what we call contextual cues. And contextual cues are quote unquote signals of opportunity that arise from the environment. So, your speaker emitting sound, your dryer humming, vehicles going through a pothole or light bulb emitting light. All of these, signals of opportunities or contextual cues can be captured by these devices with sensors, and using these sense data to verify their physical relationships. And sometimes traditional notion of noise can be used as useful signals. And I've actually done exactly that in my recent work, where we use these contextual cues for security benefits. So in some of the applications in smart home, we've tried to use contextual cues to perform context-based pairing, which is nothing but autonomous pairing, cryptographic key pairing across different devices in your smart home, like your motion detector and your Amazon Alexa, and etc. So here we've been using random events like door opening, person walking, coffee machine grinding, which all induces some sort of physical context, right? And these things can actually be used as sources of randomness or sources of entropy to be fed into cryptographic pairing protocols. We've also been looking into vehicular domain, where we looked into truck platooning, which is semi-autonomous trucks that are following each other. And we tried to perform, platoon admission verification protocol by utilizing random events such as bumpy road surfaces and traffic dynamics. And similarly, we've been looking into the space of drones, where we used the actual, buzzing sound of motor sound of the drones by fingerprinting that to actually help with delivery of drone authentication. So these were using contextual cues for security benefits, and if you are interested, please, I suggest you to read some of our papers on my website. But the problem that I really want to focus today is really on the risk side of the sensing systems. So we define this term called oversensing, which is a phenomenon where there are abundantly many sensing devices overwhelmingly monitoring us. And when there are, and when an attacker actually gets such information, it may lead to detrimental consequences. This is evident as more sensors are available around us, not just from our smartphones that we're all familiar with, but gradually into smart homes and offices, and furthermore into smart nation, as we have been always talking about with smart nations in Singapore. So the main research question that I'd like to pose for today's talk is, what unforeseen information can an attacker extract from oversensing? In other words, when given access to collection of these sensing information, for example, in a smart home. So with that, I'd like to present a few of my past and ongoing work. And the first of which is risks of too much sensing in terms of sensor fusion. And this work has been published at IPSN 2017. So I think this might be a good time for some questions, if there are some questions, but let me see if I received some questions. Yeah, let me just move on, and maybe I'll take the questions at the end. Okay. So many of the smart home models envision collecting sensor data by local gateways or hubs, which then get sent out to the service provider's cloud to enable value-added services. And many of the academic research and industry solutions envision such smart home applications for applications such as occupancy monitoring and tracking, recognizing activities of daily living, localization, and etc. Unfortunately, many real-world attacks have been found in data breaches in smart home gateways and cloud, as reported by these recent articles. Hence, we are interested in finding out what other information can the attacker gain, provided that he or she has access to the sensor data. So in order to answer this question, let us first look at the related work. The state-of-the-art related work exploits individual sensors by launching side-channel attacks, leaking privacy-sensitive information. Specifically, researchers have recently demonstrated using smartphones, sensors like your accelerometers and gyroscopes to infer parts of human speech by performing pattern matching. However, we find that launching attacks to extract speech signals with individual sensors are rather limited, because these work actually performs, like I mentioned, pattern matching of quote-unquote signatures of small list of hot words. Unlike driving routes or keystrokes, speech signal exhibits much higher granularity of information and adds additional challenges. So we wanted to extend these previous works, but instead of looking at just the hot words, we wanted to ask the question: can we extract all words rather than that are intelligible, that can be understood by humans without the need for machine learning techniques? And so we look into the possibility of reconstructing intelligible speech signal by fusing non-acoustic sensors, in other words, non-microphone sensors, by providing an intuitive exemplary scenario. So here we have a smart TV remote as well as gaming controllers lying on coffee table, each equipped with an accelerometer. It is not difficult to imagine that the sensor data may be collected in the near future by the manufacturers for user behavior analysis or other legitimate reasons. However, as the victims sitting on the sofa speak, these devices with their sensors capture speech signal, which the attacker later uses to reconstruct speech signals. The scenario demonstrates a strong yet potential case for the attacker, specifically illustrating the practicality of close proximity setup of sensors and speakers. But as pointed out earlier, individual sensors are responsive to human speech, which are prevalent in forms of, like structural monitoring sensors, like in buildings like accelerometer or geophone or seismic sensors, or activity sensors and TV remote and game controllers. In that case, why do we even need to fuse multiple sensors in the first place? Well, it turns out that getting sensor data from a single device is not enough to obtain an intelligible signal, as they are limited in sampling rate. In other words, on the order of hundreds of hertz. But it turns out that we need at least 5,000, in other words, 5 kilohertz to get intelligible speech signal. To put things in perspective for you, your landline telephone in CD quality audio is sampled with microphone at 8,000 hertz and 44.1 kilohertz respectively. So on the order of hundreds of hertz is very low. So this is why previous work attacking single sensors were merely performing pattern matching of signatures of small lists of hertz. So here I wanted to illustrate this phenomenon by playing a recording of a vibration sensor, a geophone, where one is sampled at 8 kilohertz and the other at 1 kilohertz. Let me play that for you. The first one is 8 kilohertz. Let me play that one more time for you. So that was the word apple. Now if I downsample that to 1 kilohertz, it's clear that the 1 kilohertz signal is not intelligible. Okay, so fusion of sensors actually really implies high sampling rate or high overall sampling rate. Sorry. Okay, so the main research objective of this part of this talk is that can we reconstruct intelligible speech signal from a network of non-microphone sensors, each sampled at a very low sampling rate. To solve this research question, we present Pitchin, which is a way to actually fuse across different sensors of the same modality, such that each sensor is quote-unquote pitching in to contribute to a reconstructed amalgam signal. And by the way, amalgam is a word that means mixture of different materials. So here we have the victim speaker speaking, and there are multiple sensors 1 through N recording. And so the main contribution of Pitchin is to actually designing and implementing this amalgam generation module. And specifically, we described the signal integration module, which is the main contribution of the amalgam generation. And we extend the idea of time interleaved ADC, or TIADC for short, for implementing this integration module. And TIADC is nothing new. TIADC is actually used in embedded systems to increase the ADC sampling rate by performing multiple ADCs in parallel, as shown in the following example. So if we have 3 ADCs, ADC 1, 2, and 3, and the overall TIADC is at the end, if ADC 1 samples, then 3, then 2, then 1, 3, 2, you can see that the TIADC actually has 3 times the effect of the sampling rate compared to the individual ADCs. So in that sense, we extend the idea to implement this to a distributed TIADC, where we treat each sensor data or sensor node as a virtual ADC. Hence, we interleave or fuse across different sensor data. However, we still have quite a bit of number of challenges to provide this interleaving, and so there are these steps of pre-processing and post-processing. And post-processing is to get rid of artifacts that may have been introduced during interleaving. And there are other problems such as time synchronization and temporal offset. We assume some notion of time synchronization and discuss the details in the paper. And temporal offset is a variation in starting time offset across sensors, and there are clock drifts as a factor. And we also evaluate this comprehensively in our paper, and I suggest you to, or I invite you to read our paper for more details. In the interest of time, I'm only going to look into how normalization actually helps with this interleaving, helps the interleaving. And so, so we first interleave the 2 signals the signal 1 in blue and signal 2 in red, which are not normalized. So hence the interleaved signals look more like this, which is actually leading to high distortion. We now show an interleaving signals of 1 and 2 after the normalization. So as you can see from the normalization, it's really smooth and does not has minimized the distortion. So such pre-processing steps are needed because observations are quite different across distinct, sensors, right? So their hardware is different and their orientation, location, etc. are all different, which is actually not the case for the traditional standard TI-ADC in an embedded system. Okay, so I'd like to quickly present the evaluation. The main goal of our evaluation is to demonstrate a proof of concept of pitch and attack using real-world sensor readings. And so the variables that we set are the following. We have different sensor modalities, number of sensing nodes and per sensor sampling rate. And I'd like to present a quick example of our data collection process. So we have, 4 sensors: geophone, which is a vibration sensor, accelerometer, and gyroscope, and then microphone for comparison. And we have a speaker who is, presented as a victim speaker, and the speaker is about 1 meter away from the sensors and speaks at a presentation level of 85 dB. And we record a total of 40 words, 10 words from each of these word groups as shown in this table. And the 4 word groups are names of people, cities, companies, and numbers from 1 to 10. And in our user study, each participants were given a recording of different words or portions of recordings in random order. Along with each recording, they were also given which word group of the recordings it belongs to. Note that the aforementioned list is not provided. So, for example, the participant is given the following instruction: please transcribe the following recording, which is a name of any city in the world. And we've recruited 230 participants and performed the study on Mechanical Turk. Okay, so a very quick highlight of our results. As I said, the reconstructed signal is amalgam signal, which is really the fused and reconstructed signal. And so on the y-axis, here's the result, and y-axis is the transcription accuracy, or the average transcription accuracy across the 230 participants, and y-axis is the number of nodes that are fused. In other words, resulting in the overall sampling rate. So in the first case, this is 2 nodes that are fused, where each node is sampled at 1 kilohertz. Hence, the overall sampling rate is 2 kilohertz, then 4 kilohertz, then 8 kilohertz, because we're fusing across 2, 4, and 8 nodes. But before I proceed, I'd like to, get your help a little bit and ask you to play the role of our subjects or participants in our user study. So we're going to do something quite fun here, where I'm going to play the sound of this recording, and I'd like you to please help me in guessing what word was really played. And I wish we had this in-person interactive presentation here, but we'll see how this works. So let me give you a hint. This is a number between 1 and 10. Okay, so here's the. Did you all hear that? That was at 2 kilohertz. In other words, fusing 2 nodes. Okay, one more time. Okay. Usually, right now, I cannot hear you at the moment. I don't want to stop the presentation for now, so I'll just proceed. But usually, the common contenders are 7 or 11. I'm sure some of you may have guessed that. Now, let's move on to 4 kilohertz and see if you can hear that better. Right? You're starting to hear it a little bit clearer. And now 8 kilohertz. 7. Right, so the answer is 7. And you can see that you can hear it much clearer. So the takeaway points of this part of this talk is that Pitch fuses non-acoustic sensors with low per node sampling rate, and we are able to reconstruct intelligible speech signal up to about 80% of victim speech during our experiments. And we have been looking into extensions and seeing some promising results. As we want to move to fusing across different sensor modalities. And we've been using deep learning approaches to actually fuse across accelerometers and gyroscopes in a smartphone. With that, I'd like to move on to the other parts of my talk, and I'd like to provide some glimpse of the current and ongoing work that I've been working on with my students, and still within the realm of the risks of too much sensing or risks of oversensing. And in this part of the work, which is currently under review at Censys, this is trying to utilize your vacuum cleaners as a spying device. So we're trying to eavesdrop using the LiDAR sensors on this robot cleaner. So if you take a look here, this round thing on top of the vacuum cleaner is actually a LiDAR sensor. So that's very similar to your self-driving cars, LiDAR sensor that is actually going around 360 degrees. So in this work, which we title LiDAR phone, we're actually, like I said, utilizing this as a spying device, and we want to repurpose this LiDAR sensor as a microphone. And LiDAR sensor is nothing but a laser sensor that is shooting at 360 degrees. So it's spinning 360 degrees, and it's used in vacuum cleaners today because of its mapping purposes. So it looks to its surroundings, gets the distance measurements, and sort of maps its current position with respect to the environment that it is in. And the solution that we wanted to provide is, or as an attack, is to process and extract traces of sound signals from this noisy laser reflections to capture the speech. So we utilize the reflected laser beams off of minutely vibrating objects like your trash can when it is located near the victim's computer speaker. So when a victim engages in an online meeting like this one today, for example, and if the victim is using a computer speaker, the speaker emits certain sound, which then inherently minutely vibrates the nearby objects like trash can or your lunch takeaway bag, etc. And if the robot cleaner's LiDAR actually shines on the object like this trash can in here, for example here, you can actually extract very minute but interesting pieces of information, which then the remote attacker could actually extract, provided that the attacker actually has a remote exploit to the robot cleaner, which has actually been witnessed in several recent attacks. So with our experiments, we actually see a very promising result of about 90% of digit and song classification in this type of experiment setup. Okay, and I'd like to quickly move on to my next project, which is ongoing work currently under review at Usenix, but also we've published a preliminary version of this at Hot Mobile this year. And here we wanted to use kind of a crazy idea, but we wanted to use sound to actually infer the secret or shape of the victim's physical key. So what I mean by that is, as a victim is inserting his or her key into his or her door, it makes this sound, right? And this sound can actually be captured by a nearby attacker's microphone to actually try to recover this secret. And it turns out that, unfortunately, sound alone is actually quite difficult. But if we actually fuse with video footages of the victim holding the key, then we see something very promising. And it's interesting that each modality, in other words, sound alone or video alone, it really does not provide sufficient information. But when we use that together, in other words, they actually constructively complement each other, that we are able to reduce the key space up to around, just 2 keys from over 60,000 possible keys. So this is a really promising and interesting and rather scary attack in some sense. And very quickly, moving on to the next thing. So a lot of our work that I've been, telling you today has been, focused around attacks, right? And so attacks on oversensing. And we've actually, had the pleasure to be invited to communications of the ACM to write an article on this oversensing in smart homes. So I suggest you to, or invite you to read our article that's also linked online. And with that, before closing my talk, I'd like to open up for collaborations, and you know, I'm very open to collaborations. So please contact me if you are interested in any of these areas or related areas. With that, I'd like to conclude my talk and open it up for questions. So let me go back and stop sharing. Okay. All right. So any questions?
Hi. Yeah, so if you look at the meeting chat, there is a question from Pauline. So I can read up to you too. So Pauline is asking, have you done any work with medical IoT security? So for example, the coronavirus tracking and tracing in Singapore.
Yes. So the short answer to that is not yet, but I say not yet because I'm quite interested in medical aspects of sensing as well. In fact, specifically with this coronavirus aspects, we've been looking into two potential areas of potential research. One, we're actually collaborating currently with folks at SUTD, is to try to see if we can utilize earable sensors. What I mean by earable is your AirPods or these wireless earphones, and they actually have a lot of sensing devices in them. And we find that very interesting idea is that, you know, this coronavirus is spreading because people actually have their hand-to-face touch movements, right? And so we wanted to see if your earphones could actually determine if you've actually touched your hands and, you know, which part of your face has been touched and etc. And so we're actually investigating that, and we have very promising results there. And that could also lead to other types of, you know, medical IoT, not specifically in security, but it could look into emotions as well, because people start to touch their face, and, you know, when I'm nervous, when I'm talking, I, you know, tend to do this, for example, that sort of thing. So we've been talking with some psychologists, and they say that this may be, you know, potentially useful for, you know, emotion like depression diagnosis, because then you could have people wear this earphone all throughout like 1 week, and, you know, not in front of their doctors, and see, you know, whether this potential patient is going into depression or not. With regards to contact tracing, for example, we've also looked into ways to further improve the traditional ways of contact tracing. A lot of, you know, researchers have been very actively looking into privacy preserving contact tracing using Bluetooth. It's very similar to the Trace Together app that GovTech has implemented. However, the problem with the current and existing contact tracing applications using Bluetooth is that it's prone to high false positives, because Bluetooth transmission range is, you know, actually much wider than the actual, you know, social distancing or within the social distancing distances. So the interesting thing that we've been looking into is, for example, I'm in a meeting room, and there's a person who walks by my meeting room. So I'm actually not in contact with the person, and later that person gets diagnosed. In today's contact tracing app, it turns out that I will also be quarantined because I was within that Bluetooth range, right? But actually, I should not be, you know, quarantined because I was not, you know, in direct contact, even though Bluetooth thinks that I am. So, so what we're actually looking into doing is we wanted to see if we can utilize these other sensing modalities like barometers and magnetometers and, you know, microphones that are all available on our smartphones to really see if we can do this what we call co-presence verification. And so, you know, we can look at things like room impulse responses and etc., such that we can actually, you know, discern whether I am actually in direct contact with the person. I'm not saying that we should bash Bluetooth. I think we should work with Bluetooth, but we should still provide a mean, privacy preserving contact tracing is very important, but we should also try to reduce the false positives, because if we have, you know, explosion of this pandemic, you know, incidents, everything is resource scarce, right? So your testing is resource scarce and stuff such that we want to try to focus our resources to the people that are, you know, really needed and not the false positive ones. So yeah, so I hope that answered that question. Any other questions or?
I saw follow-up comments from Pauline, which is, I think she's suggesting that since GDPR there is a new regulation due next year to address medical IoT privacy.
I see.
So yeah, she's just saying that maybe you might want to talk to law and policy people too. Yeah,
Right. That's
the follow-up suggestion.
Yep. Thank you so much for the suggestion.
Any other questions from others? You can type it in the meeting chat. If not now, I think you can also reach out to Prof later on, or you can keep typing in the meeting chat and then we will pick it out and pass it to him later.
Yes. Yes, my email is junhan, JUNHAN, @compt.nus.edu.sg. So please do not hesitate to contact me for any reasons. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yun. So we will now move on to our second speaker. Bring up. Okay, so I hope you can see the slides with Igor's biography. So Igor Konovalov is a managing director at Far East Advisory. So he's a recognized expert in the cyber threat intelligence and mobile security. So again, you can read his previous experience on the screen, and then you can also reach out to him after if you are also interested in the field of the cyber threat intelligence. So without further ado, I'll pass to Igor to start his talk.
Thank you very much, and just let me fire up my screen here. Hopefully you can see that. Hello everyone. First of all, I wanted to thank you for attending today's talk. My name is Igor Konovalov, and today I would like to focus on cyber warfare and cyber threat intelligence. About myself, as you just briefly heard, I'm a recognized subject matter expert in cyber threat intelligence and mobile security with global experience in both established enterprises and early stage startups. I hold a master's degree in electrical engineering from the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. And prior to my current responsibilities, I held several executive and technical positions in companies like FireEye, Cisco, ABB, ZecOps, and CloudMark. And I will begin today's talk with a look at modern cyber warfare, followed by an overview of key geopolitical challenges in cyberspace. And after that, we will focus on cyber threat intelligence and how it helps to achieve decision advantage. And then lastly, we will also have a chance to review key geopolitical and technology trends that effectively impact cybersecurity, and then followed by a high threat landscape of Singapore and questions and answers. So as a preface, I wanted to say that over the last 2 decades, cyberspace has gradually evolved to become essentially the primary domain of warfare, and cyber weapons became the new normal, unfortunately. And consequently, escalations and continuous increase in cyber attacks is almost a certainty nowadays. One of the reasons threat operators have turned to offensive and reconnaissance cyber operations is due to significantly higher return on investment as compared to physical attacks, as well as their ability to target almost any victim regardless of their geolocation. And furthermore, and of minor and major importance, depending how you look at it, the asymmetric nature of cyber warfare enable attackers to effectively penetrate highly sophisticated and advanced defenses with disproportionately fewer resources. And all of that can be accomplished with a high degree of anonymity and inherent uncertainty and attribution to a specific threat actor. In today's cyber warfare, adversary objectives can be broadly grouped into destabilization and disinformation, process disruption and cyber physical damage, financial gain and money laundering, and political, economic, and military advantage. And to achieve their objectives, adversary often leverage some of the following tactics, techniques, and tools. From the cyber propaganda and fake news for destabilization and disinformation campaigns, various types of destructive and wiper malware, as well as distributed denial of services attacks for cyber physical damage and process disruption. And on the other hand, if you look at financial services domain, ransomware, banking trojans, and personally identifiable theft are generally tools and techniques used by financial crime operators. Whereas cyber espionage actors often rely on zero-day exploits and advanced persistent threats in order to basically maintain persistent access to both public and private networks and ultimately acquire intellectual property. And then from a target standpoint, typically ideologically and socially motivated actors often target social media platforms and mass media, whilst rivaling states might also focus on targeting, for example, industrial control systems, IoT, power grids, and operational technology, amongst others. And then on the other hand, point of sale terminals and ATMs are systems that cyber criminals frequently target when they compromise retailers or banks, for instance. Lastly, cyber espionage operators tend to focus on usually military networks, diplomatic affairs, and government institutions. Now, let's have a look at some of the key geopolitical challenges in cyberspace. Firstly, over 30 governments today have acknowledged that they possess offensive cyber capabilities which contribute to the overall weaponization of cyberspace. In order to address this growing problem, some organizations and public institutions have been working towards a digital Geneva Convention. Now, much like the original Geneva Convention, the digital one is intended to protect civilians from state-sponsored cyber attacks. Secondly, technology has advanced more quickly than the government's ability to control it. And as a result, cyberspace governance remains to be largely an open matter that has yet to be agreed upon internationally. A number of United Nations groups and the main experts have actually proposed to develop so-called cyber norms, which can be loosely translated to expectations of appropriate behavior in cyberspace in order to regulate activity and limit damage from malicious cyber actors. Furthermore, whilst conventional warfare is regulated by the international humanitarian law, cyber warfare is not. And in response to that predicament, a number of governments attempted to interpret how international law applies to cyber warfare in a document which is called Tallinn Manual. And of course, you can find all that online as well. In addition, I would like to highlight that cyberspace and censorship could be a matter of fierce debates, especially considering that each state often imposes its own governance and laws related to these subjects. And finally, I would like to point your attention to one of the main challenges and risks of modern cyberspace, which is complexity of attribution due to plausible deniability and high degree of anonymity achievable in cyber domain. Now, plausible deniability allows attack perpetrators to deny their knowledge or responsibility of an attack. This is crucial, and the reason it is crucial is because in order to initiate an appropriate defensive response to any security threat, essentially from cyberspace, attribution of the blame must be possible. Cyber attacks do indeed leave technical clues, and sometimes those clues are useful. However, predominantly they are circumstantial and often not sufficient to attribute a cyber attack with high confidence. Nowadays, if you look at attribution, it is mostly achieved by means of forensic evidence, geopolitical analysis, and cyber threat intelligence. And on the next couple of slides, what we're going to do, we're going to look at what cyber threat intelligence actually is, and how does it help governments and enterprises to achieve decision advantage. So cyber threat intelligence, or as it's sometimes called CTI, can be defined as an evidence-based knowledge, including context, mechanisms, indicators, implications, and actionable advice about existing or emerging threats and hazards that can be used to make informed decisions. So I appreciate that this terminology might be somewhat new. So why don't we put it into perspective and look how cyber threat intelligence can be used across military, academia, and cybersecurity. And the first layer is effectively data, which can be represented as numbers, signals, or indicators of compromise. In the military context, a number of aircrafts or infantry size is an example of data. In academia, a number of exam questions or exam duration, and in cyber threat intelligence, IP addresses, domains, or file hashes. The common attributes here is that data is mostly raw, unfiltered, and without context. The second layer is information, which includes statistics, calculations, and categorizations. For example, terrain analysis and battle tanks capabilities provide important information in the military context. In the same way as, for instance, sample exam questions and relevant preparation material in academia environments, or in cybersecurity terms, analysis of various malware families, or let's say ransomware trends. And the common attributes of information mean that it is mostly based on generic and backward focused analysis, which is often underpinned by passive collection. And finally, the third layer is intelligence, which essentially consists of rich insights, patterns, also context into subject matter and related aspects. Now, example of intelligence can be adversary battle objectives, maneuvers, logistics, or let's say troops morale. And in academia context, it can be exam answers and deep knowledge of subject matter, or in cybersecurity domain, for example, hackers' motivations, capabilities, tactics, tools, and targets. Now, organizations with advanced cyber capabilities seek to obtain cyber threat intelligence in order to make informed decisions and actions whilst reducing risks with tactical, operational, and strategic type of decisions. And that's really the purpose of cyber threat intelligence. On the next slides, we will look into some common use cases of cyber threat intelligence pertinent to different stakeholders. So let's start off by looking at some cybersecurity functions where cyber threat intelligence is needed and used. And by the way, this is all industry insights. This is actual practical ways how cyber threat intelligence actually used on a daily basis. So on a tactical level, technical indicators of compromise coupled with malware intelligence are typically used by a network operations center and IT stakeholders in order to prioritize security mitigations and patching. It also helped to improve blocking effectiveness of security technologies and ultimately track different malware families and vulnerabilities. From the operational cyber threat intelligence, the tools, techniques, and procedures are used by security operations center and incident response professionals in order to prioritize cybersecurity investigations and incident response, as well as to understand adversary motivations, capabilities, and tactics. Operational cyber threat intelligence is also used to track adversaries that pose highest risks to an organization and ultimately correlate cyber threats with business operations. And then strategic cyber threat intelligence is mostly leveraged by threat intelligence analysts and managers to attempt and predict threats and cybersecurity hazards on the horizon. More specifically, it helps to understand future and emerging cyber threats, track geopolitical and evolving cyber trends, and also create what's called tailored and customized threat profile of an organization and ultimately correlate cyber trends with business goals. And finally, from executive cyber threat intelligence standpoint, it helps senior management, such as chief information security officers, to prioritize investments into cybersecurity technology, as well as govern cybersecurity risks of mission critical functions. And also, oftentimes, it helps to prepare for highly overlooked domain of preparing for compliance, legal, and regulatory risks. Finally, also to determine overall cybersecurity strategy. So this hopefully provides you with a high-level overview of why cyber threat intelligence is indeed crucial for informed decisions and decision-making. And you can also see that it can be used across multiple platforms, stakeholders, and functions. Now we're coming to the remainder of this presentation, where we're going to look at selected trends in technology and geopolitics which tend to affect cybersecurity. Tracking macro trends, I would say, is very important because it helps to address existing cybersecurity challenges as well as to prepare for the evolving ones. And the way I look at it is knowledge of possible dangers gives you always a significant advantage to prepare better for such dangers. So the first one is migrating to cloud services and moving workloads to cloud environments. Whilst cloud migration offers many benefits, such as, for example, reduced physical data center footprint and faster deployment times, it also means that security professionals may not have sufficient threat monitoring capabilities and may find it significantly more challenging to investigate incidents. Alas, hackers have become adept at exploiting cloud and hybrid environments, and hence organizations need to pay, in my opinion, careful attention to cloud security. It is also estimated that mobile threats already account for 30%, or actually over 30% of all cybersecurity threats. And so, since most of our personal and daily lives are managed and stored in mobile devices, threat operators are particularly motivated to target phones and tablets with a wide range of cyber attacks, including what's called user unassisted or zero-click attacks via radio, voicemail, and other vectors. User unassisted attack means that you as a user don't actually have to do any action to be infected. Moreover, and that's in my opinion very important, for the first time ever, there's a growing body of evidence that indicate that there are more vulnerabilities and associated exploits for Apple iOS than for Android devices. Now, this in turn points to the very high likelihood, based on both my experience in the industry and overall trends, that at present, Android devices are in fact more secure than iOS devices. Now, whilst this may actually sound very unexpected, almost counterintuitive, given the number of high-profile iOS vulnerabilities and exploits discovered this year alone in 2020, in my view, it does reinforce that iPhones and iPads are no longer more secure than Android devices. Artificial intelligence is also playing an increasing role in cybersecurity, and whilst it is very common to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to analyze large volumes of incidents and determine potential threats, threat operators are also weaponizing powerful AI capabilities to conduct information operations. For example, by using deepfake images, or in other words, replacing, let's say, an existing image of a person with a computer-generated and highly realistic, albeit entirely fake image. In addition, recently, artificial intelligence-powered neural networks are used to create what's called computer-generated fake narrative, which is already used to basically affect public opinion across different communication platforms. And unfortunately, it is next to certain that we will continue to see more instances of artificially generated content in the coming years. And there's definitely a major need to track and control that and detect it. The other interesting trend is ransomware sophistication. This has been affecting a lot of cybersecurity domains over the last couple of years, and ransomware is essentially a type of malware that infects systems and files, rendering them inaccessible until a ransom is paid. This basically encrypts the data so that you can't access it. Some notable developments in cyber undergrounds include cybercrime outsourcing, for example, ransomware as a service, which allows amateur and low-skilled hackers to launch sophisticated and advanced ransomware attacks for a fraction of a usual ransomware development cost. And that is indeed a very troubling trend. The other interesting one is that the number of Internet of Things devices or IoT devices is estimated to reach 25 billion devices by 2021. Now, IoT devices are basically smart devices with internet connectivity. Some of the examples will be well familiar for you, and we talked about that in our previous talk, but for example, wireless sensors, smartwatches, medical sensors, or even home routers are all examples of IoT devices. Now, despite IoT device ubiquity, most of these devices are designed with the functionality in mind as opposed to security in mind. And this predicament first manifested on a global scale at the end of 2016, when an infamous Mirai malware took advantage of this unsecured IoT devices, causing an unprecedented at scale distributed denial of service attack, temporarily crippling a few high-profile internet services. Again, unfortunately, large-scale DDoS attacks are expected to continue and become more frequent. And finally, major global events such as COVID-19 pandemic, Olympic Games, civil unrest, elections, military operations, and economic sanctions are all examples of geopolitical affairs that may have a profound influence on cybersecurity and associated trends. So we're almost at the end of this presentation, and on this slide, we're going to have a look at some of the most common cyber threats in Singapore. According to Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, CSA, website defacements in 2019 increased by 44.3%, while phishing incidents rose by a whopping 195% as compared to the previous year. There were also 35 publicly disclosed ransomware attacks in 2019, an increase of almost 67% from the year before. Malware infections also increased by almost 77%, with over 2,300 Singapore-based botnets detected a day on average. And also interesting statistic about Singapore is that overall there were 9,430 cybercrime incidents, which accounted for roughly 25%, or 1/4, of all crimes in Singapore in 2019. And e-commerce scams basically comprised roughly 30% of all cases. And finally, just like any other developed nation, Singapore organizations and government institutions face an elevated risk of threats that are focused on intellectual property acquisition. Now, in conclusion of my talk, I would like to say that, in my view, we're living at the age of unprecedented speed of ideas, innovations, and breakthroughs that are emerging from cyberspace. And I do believe it has no known precedents in the past. So consequently, it is my opinion that these developments will continue to change the actual identity, the very identity of our lives. And on that note, I would like to thank you for listening to my presentation today. Should you have any questions or comments, please do not hesitate to contact me via my email at igos@farage.sg. And based on this, I would like to conclude my talk and open floors to any questions.
Any questions for Igor? You can type it in the chat. Oh, okay. If no questions for now, I think you have Igor's contacts just now, so you can contact him. Thank you again, Igor, for the presentation. Now we will move on to our last speaker. Let me bring up his bio. Okay, so our last but not least speaker is Yap Chen Nam. So he has actually approached us for the partnership this time with the IEEE Singapore Computer Chapter. He's also a faculty at the Temasek Polytechnic, the Informatics and IT School. So one of his research topics will be in the homomorphic encryption that he will be talking about today. And I believe he has also supervised many interesting student projects. So please do listen to what works he has been doing, and then also you can connect with him if you're interested in working more with the school too. Chen Nam, I pass to you for your talk.
Thank you. Okay, let me share my screen. Are you able to see my screen? Right.
Yes, I can see.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So today my talk is extension to TFHE and multi-key TFHE. So basically the talk basically is we'll focus more into homomorphic encryption. Basically, okay. My name is Yap Chen Nam from Temasek Polytechnic. Okay. I'm from the Faculty of Cybersecurity and Digital Forensic. Okay. So these are some of the things that I'm going to cover in the coming part of it. So we'll cover some background, some of the current essential issue of authentication, fixed point issue, and multi-key issues. Okay. Homomorphic encryption, first of all, is just to go back to the basics of encryption. There are actually three different types of encryption. First of all, is data at rest. Basically, if you have a hard disk in your machine or whatever is that is not going anywhere, which is local, basically you do an encryption there. It's known as data at rest. The next thing is there's data at rest. The next thing is data in transit, which means that let's say you are connected to the network. Okay, you're no longer silo, right? So you have data in transit or data in motion, we call it that. So basically, let's say you're transmitting any data, so across the network, your local network or internet, there's data in transit. These are the two main kind of encryption that exist today in almost everywhere. So you're at home, your notebook, you have a BitLocker, which is data at rest. You make use of the chipset to actually encrypt, and then you use your operating system. And then the other one is basically things like your VPN, your TLS, your IPsec, basically is data in transit. Okay, so the next thing that digital data that use a lot that's not very well done out for the past I would say past 30 to 40 years is data in use, because data in use is something that has been found in the 70s by RSA. That they found that what do we mean by that? Basically, when you're doing computation, let's say you're not doing computation locally, you're doing computation somewhere in the server or whatever service space. You need to do some computation, but it needs some form of encryption, because encryption is not really done in those locations. So most of the time when you just transmit whatever data securely over the network over to the server site, it'll be decrypted before it's been processed. So there's many data in use. Okay, this thing has been it has not been done out in a very big way, because it was the maths behind the scene is actually extremely complicated. Not a lot of people are able to do up that piece of maths until very recently, that the Craig Gentry, which is by IBM, he did his PhD, and then he has published the first generation of full homomorphic encryption. Of course, there is of course a partial homomorphic encryption, but we have to today's topic we'll move towards more fully homomorphic encryption. He's using a lattice-based homomorphic encryption, which the computation then every computation takes about 30 plus or minutes just to do a very simple computation. What we're talking about here, latency in terms of that is per gate. Let's say you have an AND gate, OR gate, NOR gate processing takes about 30 plus minutes or so. Okay. It comes to about 2012, that's about 2009, that's about 10 years ago, about 7 years ago, the IBM library, they have improved over the time. The latency actually has reduced down to about 5 to 10 minutes per process, right? And of course, by 2016, TFHE basically is by the French lady, the Versailles University, they have improved it to about certain part of it, the overall process, the per gate, we have reduced down to about 13 milliseconds or so. So that's the kind of the generation of full HE, full homomorphic encryption process is. It's possible to use a partial homomorphic encryption, but sometimes we'll hit some issues, okay? Because if you start using partial homomorphic encryption, partial means that you can either do addition without multiplication, or you can do multiplication without addition. Okay, so because your typical mathematical calculation, it may involve addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and a lot more. In actual fact, if you take a look at a modern processor, modern, that means 1985, coming to 40 years ago. Okay, so it actually goes beyond just a simple microprocessor, simple arithmetic calculation, but it goes a lot more than that. So in actual fact, it deals with a lot more things. So we cannot just deal with simple stuff. And then if you start aggregating all these functions together, you need a fully homomorphic encryption rather than especially for scientific research. Okay. Okay. There are several approaches in terms of the homomorphic encryption. BGP, for a lot of systems, for example, early system like BGP, which is HLEAP, which is IBM. Currently, if you read the news recently, IBM is doing a test with the bank. They have just finished the test with the bank, so it's basically more on integer. Okay. So well, integer is a very important step forward, but I think we a lot of computation, especially scientific computation, you need to go beyond just pure integer, right? So yeah, there are some machine learning and whatever technique that is used in this particular model. Okay, then they come with CKKS, which is the Korean University. So they deal with floating point. Actually, they didn't really go and attack at the angle of floating point. It's a totally different library. Okay, but currently what happened is most people are using CKKS in this area if you talk about full homomorphic encryption. So whether it's Microsoft, MIT, or IBM library, they not only have their own BGP. Of course, Microsoft Seal is using their own, and IBM is using LeapHit. Okay, but they all use in terms of fixed point CKKS in terms of their calculation. Another thing is bits. TFHE is based on goes down all the way to be able to do bits level. Remember, integer doesn't deal with bits. Integer basically just deals with your AND gate. No, your calculation, your adder, your subtraction, your multiplication, and your division. Okay, so you just have addition of numbers and whatever. But when you need, sometimes you need to have some Boolean circuit. When you think in terms of a programmer or developer, you need to have some form of ability to be able to do some AND operation or some operation, because some logic that you need to put into, that you need to do some process, it comes into Boolean circuit, which is what TFHE strength really is. So you will see that there are some Chameleon and some other libraries that actually combine 3 different libraries of homomorphic encryption. Okay, I think using 3 different libraries becomes yeah, they have another higher layer compiler at the end of the day, but it becomes extremely complicated for a lot of people to do. So I think at the end of the day, you want to do the security, and in order to make use of homomorphic encryption, one of the tasks of what our research on is try to do the reduction of complexity in terms of library, because when you start having very complicated libraries, there's not a lot of people are able to use it, because you start to have a different module from integer to floating point to your bit calculation become very complicated. Okay? So there is actually a homomorphic encryption standard consortium out there in US. They runs every year. I'm not sure whether they run this year or not because of COVID-19, but they even in one of the white paper that had my best knowledge till now, there wasn't any division included there, but I suspect there are some division calculation. Okay, but because if let's say you have an integer, you will not be able to do division because you need some form of floating point. Okay, so we come back to the work that we are working on for the past I would say last year and this year, so the past 2 years. We have been working on this topic for coming close to about 4 or 5 years already. So yeah. Most of the homomorphic encryption out there basically focus on the data in use, basically, as I mentioned, right? The count of calculation. So if you see most of the library are from that perspective. But however, if you're trying to do data in use, basically you're going to have it in the server. You need to couple with some form of data in transit. Okay. The way that the library is constructed today, if you really take a look, they did not couple both in terms of that. So they leave it to the end user to think in terms of what kind of data in transit they're going to use. The trouble is if you start not doing that, the issue is you need to think of some form of, for example, TFHE, they use public key and private key, right? But it doesn't have any proper key distribution that is included within the TFHE itself. So it's not so trivial, just straight away just use the TFHE itself, because you to think of a way of doing a proper key distribution end of the day, to properly distribute the public key and the private key to the known to the endpoint. So the end of the day, the encryption without disclosing the public key and private key. There are no key distribution. There's no pairing. Okay, so the simple solution to this is basically having some key pairing and key distribution, okay, together with encryption. If you take a look at how TLS 1.3 is being constructed today, authentication is a process that comes together with encryption. You cannot just simply comes only with the encryption model. So what we have suggested, okay, my student actually last year has presented their work in the 24th IEEE Pacific Rim International Symposium on Dependable Computing in Kyoto, Japan. So we actually make use of IETF RFC 7664 standards. Okay, RFC 664 is a standard making use of elliptical curve model. Basically, that particular model actually do authentication process and pairing. So we do pairing and key distribution. You may ask, why do we choose that? Because if you really think about that issue, because first of all, it's a modern key distribution model that TLS have not actually considered getting into. It has a lot of additional feature that helps to protect and prevent hacking and meddling. Well, it became a standard end of the day. It's more of a more modern form of authentication process. Of course, yeah, I hope that you have heard about it's used in WPA3. So it's used in wireless, and in today's modern world where you have IoT or mobile connections, we expect most of the endpoint to be connected wirelessly, so we'll try to choose something that is wireless. And of course, we have heard about the Dragonfly blood attack actually. That because the attack is because of the weaknesses, the vulnerability, because they did not do a full implementation of the RFC 7664 because they found a shortcut of the hardware. So we did not did a shortcut out of the hardware. So pretty safe in from that perspective. Well, security, we cannot say we can never say 100% secure. We will always try to pursue for a better and further solution. The key thing is why we are choosing this, because it allows us to in the future to further extend to some additional post-quantum authentication method, because currently ECC is not in terms of key distribution and key pairing is not 100% post-quantum. So we're still looking at some solution out there, be it the Microsoft solutions of IBM or MIT solutions out there. So we are looking into this now currently. So that's one of the work that we are working on. But it's possible for us to extend to RFC 7664. Okay. We talk a little bit about what end of the thing that we are able to do. So we actually did the 7664 pairing together with the fully homomorphic encryption, which is the TFHE. It takes about, the pairing time takes about 2 seconds plus to complete. Okay. The TFHE key generation takes about 4 seconds. Okay. If you think about all these add up, because if you really think in terms of your computation, we are just purely doing pure computation and do a measurement, right? The TFHE key size is about 80 megabyte or so. Okay, if you want to do an AND gate OR gate operation, okay, the key size is about, the public key and private key size is about 80 megabyte or so. The whole entire transmission, because if you look at the TFHE papers, most of the time, they did not talk about how much they did to do a key distribution. The key distribution end of the day takes about 20, in total takes about 24 seconds or so in order to do complete, okay? So, in terms of pairing, in terms of the speed wise, of course, there is a lot of room for improvement. In order to do very simple computation, whether you want to do an add, you want to do a subtract and division. We have another paper earlier on, actually I presented in 2018 in London, okay, in Oxford actually, which is on all the, we built on top of the what you call that, the TFHE, in terms of be able to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division on top of that. So there's the paper on Oxford. So this is built on top of that. So that's the Dragonfly paper, which is, you can see, if a arithmetic circuit homomorphic encryption. So that was the earlier paper. That was later we add in that particular process to have that authentication process and so that to enhance the security on top of that. Okay. Most of the timing are in raw format. Currently, what we mean by raw, basically we just pipe it onto a socket and then we just transmit it over the air. We do have certain nodes inside there. It's not just a single node process, unlike what TFHE currently now in a raw model, which doesn't even have multiplication, subtraction whatsoever. We are on the process of making it to be compliant to ASN.1 standards. Basically means that things, example like basic encoding rule, which most of the protocol are conform to. Okay, for example, your IP packet, your TCP packet, okay, your ITF, most of the protocol is ASN.1 standard. So we are still working on it. We probably in a very near future will publish some papers in ITF in terms of rather than IEEE in terms of getting it as a standard. We have not decided where it will get to, but we are still working hard on it. And then of course at that on that point we welcome we hope to work with some with everyone on a collaboration, because to comply to some form of ASN standard, we come in on the day IATF standard RFC. You need to have more than a single party to work on as a standard end of the day, so you can't just work alone. All right, okay. So yeah, that's one of the things that we hope to find some collaborator to work together with us in terms of the ASN.1 standard. Okay, and to publish it as a IATF standard end of the day. Okay, so that's the first part of my talk on the Dragonfly key issue. Is there any? I don't see any questions. So let me just continue. Okay. So next thing is on the fixed point issue. What CKKS, as I mentioned, which is what IBM has been using and published, was in the news, in the media recently. Well, the question is, should full homomorphic encryption be general? It was designed for general usage. Should be able to shoot for any kind of calculation, scientific calculation, business calculation, or all kinds of stuff. Because at the end of the day, it's a computation stuff. So should it be general or specific use? Because if you take a look at, you can take a look at a video that is presented by in Microsoft CKKS. They're dealing with fixed point. If you dig a bit deeper into one fixed point, basically it means that okay, fixed point means that you have decimal point, yes, but it means that you have a fixed number of decimal point. You have 2 decimal point, 3 decimal point, 4 decimal point. Okay. From my understanding is fixed point. You end of the day, you still have to get to a certain fixed point. It advantage of fixed point for modern, if you take in terms of DSP, most of the time we talk about fixed point, we use it in DSP when you have very limited computation. It means that you will lose out some form of accuracy. You will not be able to do some calculation. Example, like you have, let's say, 2 decimal points, and then you need to have a accuracy up to about 5 decimal points. Example, in terms of bank, I don't know how many a level of accuracy that IBM is testing, because the amount of bits that is required to do the calculation in terms of bank, typically a bank need to have up to an accuracy of 5 decimal points. And if you start to do things like a division, multiplication, and you have a huge chunk of numbers, fixed point may be an issue end of the day when you are doing a huge number in terms of hundreds or thousands or millions of dollars if you need to do calculation. And then further, if you, let's say, you're going to go to scientific arena, and then you start to need to do a calculation in terms of cancers, and you need to do some calculation in terms of per molecule. You probably will have a huge numbers, and then you probably have a very, very small numbers, and you need to have that kind of precision. That is why IEEE, since the 1980s, I think it's 1985. I think there's some error here. Okay, so you would need to have there's a standard for floating point rather than a fixed point. Floating point is a lot more complicated and harder than compared to a fixed point calculation. So not a lot of people are trying to attempt full HE in terms of floating point calculation, because it's a lot slower. But the issue is, for a lot of calculation out there, you need it. Okay, there are 3 different standards out there for IEEE 754 floating point calculation. Okay, there's one in 1985, there's one in 2008, there's one in 2019. Okay, we are not able to catch up with whatever standard. We in terms of the thing that we are working on for the Temasek Poly, we are somewhere. We are not probably even 1985 standard yet. Okay, yeah, this question was earlier on, basically whether we want to have single library or multiple libraries in terms of the are we going to have CKKS with integer calculation that becomes a complication, becomes extremely painful for developer. So we are trying to reduce the complication so that homomorphic encryption can be used to help people in the near future, right? For floating point precision, are we going to have half precision, single precision? Because if you take a look at 1985 standard, we are talking about 32-bit single precision, 64-bit double precision, okay, and even further, multiple precision, which goes beyond 64-bit calculation. Things example like there is 128 bits calculation, which means that it includes addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, square root, which actually goes beyond 128 bits, 256 bits, 1024 bits calculation. So there's all these issues. And then are we going to have some half precision calculation out there? If you take a look at any modern CPU, okay, because if you start to look into this, because that means that you have to start looking into the modern processor. Example like your AVX in your Intel CPU or Neon library inside your ARM. They go way beyond fixed point. They are basically using floating point. Okay, so they are using floating point. They're using IEEE 754 standard, the processor itself. So when you try to code it, if you're going to go with the fixed point, which is going to be an issue, there will be compatibility issue in the future. So that is why we have chosen to use a floating point right at the beginning. So and then the typical calculation is and also most of the measurement today makes use of floating point operation per second. If you take a look at most of the measurement of most of the supercomputer out there, okay, most of the high performance computing are making use of a floating point operation. So last year, 2019, again, my student actually have presented a paper in the International Collaboration Symposium of in Japan again. We actually have completed some of the work in floating point. Addition subtraction, we are able to do it 32-bit at the 2-bit level, which is complied to IEEE 754. We also, well, most of the compliance we did control on overflow and underflow. So it's tough because we are trying to catch up with Moore's law. It's tough. Basically, me and several of my students. Please don't forget they are diploma students. They are not degree students. So I'm quite grateful that they have been working with me and they are quite patient with me. And so we managed to come out a single precision in terms of addition and subtraction in single precision. We have multiplication and division on half precision, which is 16 bits. So this is the accuracy at this point in time. We have some form of limitation because currently TFHE maximum is running at 64-bit processing in terms of whatever they are doing. But it's not an excuse. That was the point that we are working on. Okay, we are working hard on to resolve some of these issues. So we have some results. I can mention some of the results. It takes about 2.45 seconds to do addition for floating point. Of course, it's a far outcry compared to the integer calculation, which is only about 45 milliseconds. Okay, the subtraction is about 50 milliseconds or so, but the floating point takes a lot longer. But I think the thing is, this include this is a lot more where the actual state of where the floating point calculation is today. Okay, I don't think anyone has actually gone to this point of doing this. I think there's some papers on NTU doing some of these things, but I don't know how they go about getting that point because we did not have actually real life. I don't get to see what actually the gates get into this thing to do it. We did it practically from the gates level and we built it from scratch. So yeah, so this is the kind of timing that we do it. We are trying to do some form of calculation beyond 32 bits. We have some results. We have managed to show some form of 128 bits at this point, at this juncture. We're hitting some bottleneck at 256. I'm not sure whether it's a real bottleneck or not a real bottleneck, but I think we are doing a generalized systems that actually can do arbitrary from a computation processing perspective that so long your bus is about 32 bits, we are able to process it. So kind of that, rather than we're not limited by the 32-bit calculation, which means that you can go arbitrary any size that you want. You want to 64, 128, 256, any of the multiple 32 bits. Because if you think about it, the internet is basically well, I'm chasing after a processor which is 386. Okay, so which is common for PC and a kind of a standard that we have been used for ages, but rather than 8086, which is 80s, we are trying to hit to somewhere in the late 80s and 90s, which is what common in most of the operating system, which is what we've been using for ages. So that's where I'm trying to target at least to be able to do a 32-bit calculation, which is because at the end of the day, if you really think about it, your embedded system maximum today in terms of processor is only 32 bits. So that's where our target is, be able to do all the 32 bits and slightly beyond 32 bits, which is a single precision calculation, which is single precision and double precision for i77754. Multiple may be a bit complicated at this point in time. There's a lot of research going into it, but it will take a while, quite a while, for us to reach this particular point. But we are trying to get to this particular standard, which is even 2019 is only talking about double. 2019 standard did not actually even go into multiple. Okay. So there was another paper on homomorphic encryption that is by again the Versailles University. They move on to a multi-key. Basically, shared multi-key computation is another area in terms of cryptography that actually has been done in 2012. There is a multi-key homomorphic encryption done under BGV. There's also the lady actually in 2019. They have also actually moved into multi-key the Taurus homomorphic encryption. So what we have done, actually I've done or presented a paper just recently on behalf of my students, Coxin. He actually actually done out most of the stuff, and well, we wrote the paper together. Okay, it's known as homomorphic encryption, create multiple logic gates and arithmetic circuits. So it's an international conference again at the 8th Symposium of Digital Forensic and Security by IEEE. So because the paper that actually the Versailles University only contained NAND gate and the copy operation. So in order to do, for everyone to move further, you need to have other gates. Example, the AND gate, OR gate, NOR, XOR, NOR gate, and XOR gate. Because in order to build circuits, you need all these gates to run it. So we built all these gates beyond just the NAND gates. Okay, so we went through actually all the process and tested all the logic gate latency. So these are the computation. This is the pre-process of NAND gate out there using Taurus. We actually add on a lot of additional calculation, which is actually we created all the OR gate, NAND gate with all these computation involved. Okay, so this is additional things that we actually add on top of the typical NAND gate that is provided, because it's not efficient to build circuit purely with NAND gates. It's a lot more efficient to build process using other gates. I will show in the next slide. If you take a look, NAND gate is somewhere in terms of 0.28 of a second in terms of multi-keys. Multi-keys means that you're going to have multiple parties that come into this scenario. For example, if you look at the SEAL library from Microsoft, they support that for integer calculation. But when you start doing that from your logic gate operation, you can't use it. You can't make use of SEAL to do it. You still come back to TFHE to do it, and TFHE doesn't support multi-parties, right? So you have more than 2 parties, 3 parties. You want to do a calculation, you will not be able to do that, right? So we build out that. So there's some operation that is faster in terms of that. In terms of that, AND gate and OR gate is actually a lot faster. It's only about 2.25 per second, because you need to think in terms of that. every single calculation is cumulative. So all the gates out calculation will end up to the calculation. End of the day, your adder, your subtractor, your calculation that you're going to do it. So and then you can troubleshoot each and every count all the calculation that you want. If you start from the gate level, if you start from a mathematical level, yes, you will speed up the process. But end of the day, you need to have a team of PhDs, which I don't have, to start building all the very huge calculation that, for example, your AVX calculation that goes beyond addition, subtraction. You have your square root. You start to have your differentiation, integration, and all this kind of stuff. And if let's say you go to statistics, you go into your calculation in terms of statistics, the statistic calculation example like your sigma and all this kind of calculation, and sine, cosine, tangent, and all this calculation, you can't deal with just pure addition, subtraction. It doesn't build up to that. You need to go back to the basics of logic gate in order to build all these circuits, which if you start looking into the IBM library, you look at the MIT library, you start and look at to Microsoft library, you can't build all this calculation. So you still come back to your gates operation in order to build all these libraries. So that is where I think we hope that we contribute from that perspective to build up all the circuits that's required for most of the modern computation. We are working hard on it. We have a very small team, only about me and 3 or 4 students. So I don't think I can follow Moore's law. Double the whatever computation every 2 years. We are trying hard on that. We are trying very hard on that. But to bear with us for a few years. Okay. So we actually did out some form of arithmetic circuit using this new one on top of that. Right. So if you see, this is adder. This is already published. We are using adder paper. Of course, this may not be the most optimized adder. Therefore, of course, we are still looking into well, more sophisticated adder like carrying adder and whatever adder that out there. Okay, there are many adders out there actually. Well, you need to be AAA trained in order to. So it's tough, for my students, because they are IT trained, they are not com science trained, and then they are not AAA trained. So it'll take me for a while for me to train them both in especially in the AAA area in terms of all the gates, and then start building from scratch using circuits, right? Or using AND or NOT operation to build up circuits. Then of course your subtractor, your multiplier. So we are building some form of this kind of stuff. Okay, so all these are the stuff that we actually building. So then of course we have divider circuits. So latency, in terms of latency wise, all these are in seconds. So we tested a one-party calculation, which is well kind of pointless, but it's a comparison between a one-party and two-party, because earlier on TFHE is single-party. Okay, but of course the single-party without that multi-key option is a lot faster. Well, after the multi-key option add in, it became a lot slower. It's about 4 seconds or so. If you think in terms of 8 bits, of course it grows kind of linear. It may not be really linear. Some of them is a kind of later you take a look at the curve. Some are linear, some are actually exponential in terms of the calculation. So DeFi actually will be tremendously slow in terms of the overall 32-bit calculation. Okay, same here. So it goes way beyond seconds. Okay, still go back to minutes, and then it's been tested in terms of this. Okay. Yeah, so these are the circuits in terms of, these are the latency in terms of the adder circuit and subtraction, two parties, especially if you take a look at two parties, that it goes from linear, more linear towards more exponential as you go with more complicated circuits. So that's the key part. When you start having multi-parties calculation, it goes into more and more exponential complexity, and the timing is actually, if you go back and take a look at the timing, is really huge in terms of seconds. All these things can be optimized, but the earlier paper that is by Versailles University actually did not go beyond the NAND gate. We actually go into the real life calculation, not only do all the calculation if we think about latency that we have performed here in terms of sub-seconds, in terms of all your gates, and then go into your arithmetic circuits, which is all your adder, subtraction, multiplication, division, and provide you the actual seconds in terms of processing. So those are important things that actually this form of research is important, because end of the day you need to do both sides, right? You need to do your AND or not operation, your Boolean calculation, and sometimes you need to do all your arithmetic calculation all at the same time, because in order for most of the program to work, you need to do that. Okay, so yes, I look forward for any questions, and we are open for any collaboration. Just share back.
Any questions for Chen Nam?
I'm not sure whether.
Yeah, you can see the his profile page that you can check out, and then the email. So I think, as Chen Nam has mentioned, they are doing a lot of projects with the students over there. So if you are interested in working together with them, you can contact Chen Nam. Okay, yeah. So thank you so much, Chen Nam, for updating us on the state of practice on that area.
Thank you.
So yeah, so I'll just leave you guys with our upcoming events. So yeah, so at the end of this event, just want to thank again to all our speakers today, and also to all of you who have stayed with us to listen to the talks. We will be doing, so for now, we will, I think, keep to the online format for the technology talks. So I do know that this is a little bit, less interaction than we usually have in the physical form, but I think we will have to keep monitoring the situation, and when it's possible, then we will resume the physical activities. So I would like to highlight again the most immediate upcoming event, which is in partnership with Lynch Launchpad Singapore. So they're opening up the run for cybersecurity and also ICT, Infocom technology. So if you have technology teams in that area, please do consider checking out the program. This is really providing a lot of support for exploring the commercialization of that technology. If you are individual, also you can apply as a business lead that you can get paired up with the technology team. And of course, this can apply to early startups as well, and people who have gone through like our seed grant or similar grants where you are developing new innovations. This is also a good chance to test it out in the market. All right, so and after this one, then we probably you guys are also expecting the Singapore International Cyber Week in October. So we will also be doing some co-located workshop with that. We are still working out the details, so we will be announcing it in due course. And of course, the next edition of the technology talk. So to do follow on our website, or you can email us to be added to the mailing list so that you will always receive this announcement. Okay, so that's all for this event. Thank you very much for joining us once again. So do take care, stay healthy, and then we will hope to see you again in person as soon as the situation allows. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.